This is a short story by Hannah B. Ray, narrated by Vicky. Tomaszewski Zielinski Villanueva is a tall, thin man who happens to be no ordinary human, but is in fact the great pirate captain who only became a pirate because he was bored and needed something to do. So one day he dropped his rake on the ground, because in the land that he lived this was illegal, and he wanted to see what would happen if he disobeyed this most highly important law that was viewed as absolutely sacred to the people who ran the insane land in which he lived. When he first dropped the rake, nothing appeared to change. But after a few seconds of stunned delay, the officials came racing toward this infidel and demanded an explanation as to what possessed him to throw the poor innocent rake into this most degrading state of prostration on the horizontal level of the world. Toma, as we shall call this newly named foe of gardening tools, placed his fists on the bumps that served as his hips and answered the officials with the most arrogant tilt to his nose. I have carried out this movement that suddenly sprang into my intelligent mind for reasons I care not to explain. This dumbfounded the men in green and caused them to splutter very unprofessionally. Toma experienced one of those moments when one is standing unsuspectingly with their hands on their hips in a very unfunny situation, when one considers what his fate will be after doing something he knew from birth was wrong, where a tickling feeling rushes from the pit of their stomach to the tip of their tongue, then takes flight as a hearty laugh. Toma gave in to this uninvited guest without hesitation, and that was just the beginning of his unlucky tale that leads from raking the leaves from the lawn, to being arrested, to kneeling in front of the judge, to laying like his rake on the cold, hard bench, to escaping through a hole blown in the thick jail cell wall by a man as strange as Toma, only without the brilliant mind that now crowned captain had residing in his finely built skull. The image now zips past and screeches to a halt on the day in which we mentioned the full name and rank of this tall, thin man. What was late in arriving and caused the whole teleportation into the past was the few facts that we will now make their appearance with no drum roll as punishment for forcing us to see the sickening sight of a rake lying helplessly on its back in the browning sheets of grass. Toma lifted the spyglass grasped in his six-fingered hand back into the position it would have been had it been where it should have been in the beginning, which was directly in front of his snake-in-the-grass green eye. He grunted at the view he could see now that it was where it should be in front of him, which will take us a moment longer to see since we're not looking through the device he is. Beside the captain stands a man who should be a mystery to us, but since we had skipped through the past, we recognize this as the man who blew the hole in the prison wall and therefore freed the captain. Sir Blake! This sent by prompt airmail from the captain Toma to the short, unshaven man buckling his shoe beside the aforestated tall, thin man. Yes, captain! Sir Blake, who is in fact an honestly dishonest knight, straightened quickly enough to be at his appointment on time, but too quickly to miss the edge of the railing. This caused him to miss the date and was rewarded with the twin bumps on his head, one from the rail and one from the one he was supposed to meet. Captain Toma sent a glare to make sure the spyglass safely reached its destination on the top of the head of the evil little man beside him, and when it was satisfied that it had, the glare came back and settled on the captain's brow for a rest. Sir Blake, do you see that speck out there in the vast blue sea? Sir Blake, still acquainting himself with his new-born twins, squinted his eyes to see what that even-fingered captain was indicating with his invisible line of sight. Because it was invisible, Sir Blake had to admit with hesitation that he was not wearing his glasses that would have shown the direction the tall, thin man was gazing in. For this, Captain Toma was sure to add a late bloomer to Sir Blake's new family before giving the little man the glass with which to look through. When the glass was in front of the new eye, the captain directed the far end where it should be looking, and Sir Blake exclaimed happily that he now saw the speck of which we are trying to discover the identity. That speck, Sir Blake, I do believe, is the very one we have been searching for these many months. Why, Captain, I do concur that be the very one, Sir Blake agreed most joyously as he lowered the glass from his eye, though, to our excitement, has kept facing the identiless speck, for now, if we are careful, we may look over the little man's shoulder, close one eye, and see that the speck floating in the water is, in fact, much closer than we were led to believe it was. And it is not a speck, but is what they called it, the speck. "Spread the word!" came tap-dancing off the captain's tongue, and sent Sir Blake in that very act of movement over to the rail behind them to proclaim loudly that their search was over, for in the water ahead of them is the speck that will change their lives. The crew, which consists of a short fat man and a tall fat man, waved their hats in circles and shouted in squares while continuing to mop the floor in perfect triangles, which proved they had been paying attention to their lessons in multitasking. Sir Blake returned to his captain's side and watched as the ship came closer to the speck, floating peacefully in the roller coaster waves, trying and failing to drown it. The ship seemed to slow down to almost a standstill as the crew joined the captain and little man standing by the rail to watch the speck move with flawless beauty. After a few minutes, Captain Toma turned with a swish of his long purple coat and ordered with a bark resembling a dog's that the others turn as well, for everyone knew that a watched pot never boils and a watched speck never comes closer. The men turned abruptly, for they did not want the bump on the head that would reward them if they did not turn, and the fishes who looked up at the ships coming toward them at breakneck speed would have laughed at the four backs facing them if they had not been concentrating on staying out of the way of the invading object known to anyone smarter than a fish as a boat, which hints at the true intelligence of at least a few of the inhabitants of this vessel, for we will not cause them to feel dejected from the world of smartness by naming them, believe they were on a grand ship. Unfortunately, because the four backs did not have eyes, the boat missed the speck, only because the speck moved out of the way before being steamrolled, and the 7 eyes that faced in the direction the speck should not have been realized gasped that they were now facing what they shouldn't have been, and had to take a few minutes to check and make sure they had not mistakenly turned around to face the speck, but that the speck had indeed done the turning around. Upon this revelation of a discovery, Captain Toma rushed to the other end of the boat, followed by the little man and skimpy crew, and ordered it to turn back at once, or he would not give it the repainting he had considered giving it if it was good. The boat quickly reversed its direction, and after a moment it halted on command, and the captain, the knight, the one-eyed cleaner, and the mustached janitor looked down at the speck, which returned the gaze, but with a sideways twist that made it appear like it was accusing the faces pointed in its direction of losing their brains somewhere along the journey, for they had almost squashed its tiny shape into a non-existent shape with their boat. "O speck, lovely, beautiful, life-changing speck, wilt thou join us in our humble abode here above the waves that have tired thee for so long with their constant persistence in turning assassination thoughts into actions?" The speck considered this eloquent invitation, and finally agreed to be gently scooped up by the lowered net woven especially for this dramatic occasion. Once the speck was on board and sitting expectantly in the palm of our tall, thin character, Sir Blake and the 2 crew members saluted the moment and gravely presented their almost recompleted flag to the captain. This graceful man used his most painfully slow movements to bring his hand above the flag and put the speck into its true resting place in the center of the crossbones. There was a breath-holding moment as the speck melted into place, and then hats greeted the birds in the sky as the flag was mounted on its rope and brought to its proud state highest place to wave joyfully in the sunlight. The sight was so beautiful, Sir Blake began to cry, and Captain Toma had one of his rare moments of softness in the heart as he patted his little man on the back, the beauty flapping above him, almost bringing tears to his own eyes. "All right, then, Sir Blake, that is enough. We cannot have the world thinking we are cushions." "I'm sorry, Captain. It's just such a beautiful sight to see our beloved pirate flag back in one piece and flying so brilliantly above our heads." "Yes." Captain Toma breathed in and out, then knocked each of the men on the head and snapped the air with his sharp command to straighten up and be worthy of the pirate mark that had been restored to them after months of searching for the last speck that would bring it all together and make it whole. Now that they were back into the true state that everyone could recognize at once and would not have to be explained every time they boarded a ship to pillage, the pirates' boat turned in the direction of the lost island of treasure, which had been their goal when the bigger, better, bolder, more fantastically snooty arch-rival ship of pirates had shredded their flag and spread it across the sea to delay them in hopes of reaching the treasure first. Anyone who was at our characters' level of know-it-all would know that this was a foolish plot, since they were far better than their rivals, and no delay would put them behind enough to lose. Anyone who was at the level of a fish's mind would know that that wasn't quite true, but we will suppose it is true and continue along with the ship before it reaches the setting sun without us. As the boat sped along, because no one was watching where it was going, our Captain Toma was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the boat playing fiddlesticks with Sir Blake, while the pathetically speck-like number of crew watched the upper deck and tried not to glance at the coming mountain for fear of slowing them down and receiving a special gift on their heads for this error. Unfortunately for them, this would have been a good time to slow the ship down, as it was going so fast that it did not think to stop when it reached the beach, and everyone aboard was jolted off their feet. Or in the case of the captain and the little man flattened on their backs when the boat landed in the trees. This state of being on his back put the captain in a very bad mood, as it made him think of his cruelty to Sir Rake, and for their mistake both crew members were given an extraordinary prize of 4 knocks on each on the head. When he was finished handing out the lumps, Captain Toma raised his head and realized that the waves seemed to have changed color, and had to pause the story to treat the little man to a 5th lump of the day when he told him the waves were in fact leaves. This made the little man happy, since on a previous engagement an agreement had been forged betwixt the captain and he that stated that no more than 4 lumps a day were allowed to be given to him from the captain. Of course, lumps from the rail did not count, and the little man had a nagging feeling about the days following that agreement, and the fact that he seemed to be getting a lot more lumps on the head from rails and beams, seeming to be accidents on his part, but also being suspicious in their timing. "Oh, sparingly thin crew!" Captain Toma switched to face the men, who straightened instantly from their comforting the bumps on their heads. "We must now find a way down from the trees so that we may get the ship back in the water before we explore this island we have landed on." "Yes, sirree, Captain!" The crew used their second-to-none skills of synchronization to reply, then turned and searched the ship for a rope to get the 4 residents onto the sand below. There was in fact no rope on board, except the one that held the precious flag in its high state. There was of course no possible way they could take it down, after searching so hard to restore it to its rightful place. And so the 4 men sat down in a sort of misshapen circle to put their heads together and think. An ingenious idea popped into the little man's head, but unfortunately it jumped in so quickly that it pushed his head forward and resulted in a collision that left yet another lump on his poor forehead. He was secretly laughing inside, though, as this collision also left a mark on the captain's forehead, and Toma could not get him back for it because he had already given the little man his 4 lumps of the day. Captain Toma therefore had to pacify with lumping each of the crew members, who had sadly not been present when the deal was made and hadn't been able to get their 2 cents in to have their own heads saved from extra bruises. "Captain, oh Captain, I figured out how we can get down from the ship!" Sir Blake shouted in exclamation. This shout shook the boat so hard that it fell clean out of the trees and landed with a strange gentleness in the water right near the beach. Everyone was still for a moment. Then a bird flew from the trees with its eggs, deciding this was the perfect time to move before any crazy wooden creatures parked on top of its home. "Sir Blake, that was perfectly planned plot. It worked immensely well." Sir Blake smiled widely, keeping secret the fact that that was not his plot, since a moment's further exploration of it proved it would not have worked anyway. Now that the boat was in its proper place, the 4 men were able to drop the ramp over the side and barely hang on to it as it hit the sand, which they blamed unanimously on the one-eyed cleaner for his studying his nails in the middle of the escapade. Once the one-eyed cleaner secured the ramp by himself as punishment for his earlier thoughtlessness for others, The men came marching down one at a time in a very neat row. Captain Toma led Sir Blake, who was followed by the thin janitor, who stepped ahead of the cleaner because he was still mad at him for his sore fingers. Ahem! This said by Captain Toma as he stopped short at the end of the ramp and just missed getting hit by the three behind him as they waved their arms to keep their balance, lost the fight, and landed one in the sand, one in the water, and one in what had caused the tall, thin captain to stop in such an indignant abruptness. "Help! Help! I do not like eggs!" screeched the knight as his arms continued to wave around in the air as if he was trying to spell his name. "Janitor, what did I tell you about tossing your breakfast overboard?" Captain Toma demanded. "Why, Captain, it weren't me, I swear!" The tall, thin crew member spluttered as he climbed back on the ramp after his lovely dip in the ice-cold water. The captain turned and knocked him on the head, which caused him to lose his grip and take another not quite as lovely as the first swim. "Then whom dropped this humongously rotten egg directly in our path?" Toma wanted answers. "Why, Captain," Sir Blake paused in his spelling to stroke his unshaven chin, "I do believe it was the giant bird that flew above our ship the other day." Captain Toma nodded. "Yes, I believe that may be the case. It explains the pleasant landing and the not quite so pleasant smell wafting into my sensitive nostrils." The crew members took their cue and speedily sucked up the egg with their vacuum cleaner that nearly burst from the extra amount of water that joined the extra amount of egg. Even though the vacuum should have known it was stuffed to fullness, it apparently wanted more as it grabbed up Sir Blake's arm, and it took till the sun had set for the unusually low number of crew to find their screwdrivers to take the vacuum apart to free said arm and then clean up the egg again when the vacuum got sick. Because the sun was no longer in the sky, the four men returned to the boat, pulled the ramp up, and followed the sun's lead in tucking themselves into bed. End of part